Welcome in to Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and on today's program, we're going to be looking at the top Ronald Darby replacements. The Texans corner, which they signed at the beginning of free agency this offseason, decided to retire, thankfully, in June, so it gives the Texans some time to replace him, whether that's somebody on the roster, via trade, or in free agency. And if you're thinking, Jeremy, why are we talking Ronald Darby replacements? Is it that big of a deal? He was the third corner on this team. Well, it's because our head coach, DeMeco Ryans, actually mentioned it at his OTA presser. He said, it's not an easy decision. I wish Darby the best. When it comes to us and how we fill the position, we'll look to add another corner, whether it's a veteran or a younger player. So that tells me they are at least out there in the market looking for more cornerback help, some backup corner help to, really secure this secondary for this next season. Before we get into that, though, I have a quick question because I came across an interesting article from Battle Red Blog, and, it was talking about Derek Carr and, his retirement and how the Texans would have looked differently if they drafted him. They had a chance to take him in the second round for a multitude of reasons. Maybe they felt they needed to take an offensive lineman, which they did in Xavier Su'a-Filo from UCLA. But how would this Texans team look differently if they did draft a guy like Derek Carr in that draft class? They took Clowney first. They didn't take Carr in the second round. But I want to know from you, because I actually was in the boat of wanting the Texans to draft Derek Carr. I didn't care that his brother was the first Texans quarterback and was, somewhat of a disappointment depending on how you look at it. I know his offensive line didn't help him at all, but I was in the boat to draft Derek Carr. So I want to know from you folks at home, name someone you wanted the Texans to draft, whether it was this year or in prior years that they passed on. I'm interested to see some of the players that y'all really wanted the Texans to take in the NFL draft. Let's get into these Ronald Darby replacements, though. Here's some options that are on the Texans squad right now. You won't have to do anything. They're already on the roster, and they could just seamlessly step up and step in. Jalen Smith, Tremon Smith, Miles Bryant, D'Angelo Ross. I think, Miles Bryant, somebody who we were kind of surprised the Texans re-signed this offseason, but they brought him back for another year. Stepped in admirably last year whenever the Texans needed him. And same could be said about D'Angelo Ross. Both these guys, were playing at some point last year for the Texans, whether it was injury to Stingley or Lassiter or whoever. Both these guys saw playing time for the Texans last year. So an easy option would be just to say, okay, one of these guys can step up and step into that role to really help this Texans secondary out if any injury happens. And another guy, Jalen Smith, the rookie, who I'm not going to go into too much detail because if you saw my video yesterday, which that was right, Coop, we were going to the photo. If you saw my video yesterday, which I'll put this video in the comment section description of today's video. If you missed my video yesterday, I did a nice little breakdown on Jalen Smith and why he could easily step in and step up for this Texans team. I think those options are all viable for DeMeco Ryans, this Texans coaching staff, to replace Ronald Darby. Now, going into what DeMeco said about adding another corner, let's first look at the corners that are on the trade market, because there's not a ton that I think really fit with the Texans, but all these guys have been mentioned in some sort of fashion from different articles about being on the trade block. Jalen Ramsey with the Dolphins, Jaire Alexander with the Packers, Martin Emerson Jr. with the Browns, Jaquan McMillan with the Broncos, and Jamel Dean with the Bucks. All these guys, I scoured the internet looking for, top options for the Texans to trade for at the cornerback spot. And these were the names that came up multiple times on, could be a trade option for these various teams. Now, I don't know if any of these guys are viable for the Texans, but, let me know down in the comment section. Would you want the Texans to trade for a cornerback? Give me a yes. Give me a no down in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on whether or not you think the Texans need to make a trade. Personally, I think a trade's very unlikely. I don't think the Texans need to do that to replace the cornerback 3 on their team. If you're looking for a starter, okay, that's one thing. I get why you would want, to go out and maybe spend some draft capital and trade for a player. But for a depth piece, I don't think that makes sense. There are a bunch of intriguing free agent options the Texans could sign this offseason. And, according to Over the Cap, they have a little bit more than $16 million to play with, so they could definitely make some moves before the start of training camp. I'm going to break down my top free agent options in just a moment, but if you need a brand new Texans jersey, go ahead and shop with our friends over at Fanatics. All you got to do, go to chatsports.com/Texans jerseys. That link will be in the comment section and description of today's video. They have all the CJ Stroud jerseys, Will Anderson Jr., all the different colors, sizes available. They have kids jerseys. I believe they also have jerseys for your dog. So if you need any sort of jersey, go ahead, go do some window shopping over there. That link will be in the comment section and description of today's show. Now, before I get into my top 5 free agents, I just wanted to list a couple guys. First off, Stephon Gilmore and Kendall Fuller might be the 2 top options on the free agent market when it comes to cornerbacks, but I don't think it's a fit with the Texans because I think both these guys want at least a chance to start with whatever team they sign with. And no tea, no shade, no pink lemonade towards Stephon Gilmore or Kendall Fuller, but I don't think either of these guys start with the Texans if they're signed. They're not better than Lassiter. They're not better than Stingley at this point in their careers. So I don't think they would really want to sign with the Texans to just be a backup option for this squad. Maybe they do. Maybe they're ring chasing, but I think they still have a lot left in the tank and they would rather just try to go to somewhere that they can play. Mike Hilton from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's another really good option, but he's a slot corner. Really seen as a slot corner only. Really smaller stature, 5'9". He's not your outside corner that's going to, step in for Stingley or step in for Lassiter. So I didn't really think it made any sense for the Texans to go out and sign another slot guy when that's, Jalen Petrie. That's his role. He's your slot guy. And I think worst comes to worst, you have Jalen Smith there as well as a backup slot option. Here are my top 5 corners, though, for the Texans to sign in free agency. Number 5, Emmanuel Moseley. And he's somebody who, he didn't get a lot of burn last year for the Detroit Lions, tore his ACL in 2023, but you know where he was before that? He was with the San Francisco 49ers playing under DeMeco Ryans. So there's that connection there already. He already is familiar with DeMeco, and what have I said all offseason? This team values relationships. DeMeco Ryans, Nick Caserio, they value those relationships. So somebody like Emmanuel Moseley, who maybe not getting a lot of interest from other teams because of the injury in 2023 and then, him not really being out there on the field in 2024, the Texans could take a chance and have a really cheap contract in a guy in Emmanuel Moseley and maybe kind of step in and surprise a lot of people as a good backup option. Number 4, somebody who you've heard before, Kadar Hollman. Kind of like Miles Bryant, kind of like D'Angelo Ross, another guy who was on the squad last year and stepped in when needed, right? Is a guy who is familiar with this coaching staff, familiar with this front office, this, Texans organization, so could step in somewhat seamlessly and be another backup option. This isn't my favorite one, right? Because it's kind of, you wanted to upgrade, right? That's why you went out and signed Ronald Darby at the beginning of free agency. You go out and sign Kadar Hollman. Did you really upgrade? You're just kind of running it back from last season, in my opinion. Number 3, this is where it gets a little spicy. Asante Samuel Jr. from the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, he was injured this past year, and a lot of teams have been kind of staying away from him because he also had a neck injury this offseason that he had surgery on. Now, he visited with the New Orleans Saints. Nothing's going to happen until July whenever he has that checkup on the neck, but a lot of teams, he's only 25 years old, but a lot of teams are kind of like, no, I'm good. I don't want to touch that. Neck injury, shoulder, back injury. A lot of teams kind of shy away from that. The Texans, they don't need him to start. They need a backup option. So if he's not ready to go until like August, September, why not a little stash? Sign him to a cheap 1-year deal. He steps in, can maybe, miss the start of the year, but really come in and be a good depth piece along the way. He signs a 1-year deal, is able to re-hit free agency next offseason when he's healthy. I think that's somewhat of a win-win if you ask me, because you get a good cornerback, a good depth piece, maybe at a cheap deal because he just wants to be able to, come back at his own pace. And with the Texans, he'll be able to do just that because he'll be a backup piece on this team. Number 2, Levi Wallace, a guy who's been around the league, has, hopped around from team to team, has started at certain points as well, has been a good player in the NFL. I think he could possibly step in another guy who could easily, be that backup option for this Texans team. I think he could be a decent option if you ask me. Levi Wallace, another good player that the Texans could add maybe a little bit more on the veteran side, but like I said, you just need a backup player. He comes at number 2 on my list. Coming up, number 1 on my list, but here are the guys who just missed the cut for me whenever it comes to free agent options for this Texans team. Jack Jones with the Raiders is an intriguing option. He's a free agent, even though I don't know his fit because he's not very fond of tackling. James Bradbury is another option, but he's dealt with some injuries and getting up there in age. Caleb Farley has dealt with his share of injuries. You know what I said about Asante Samuel Jr., double that for Caleb Farley when it comes to concerning injuries. Eli Apple, he's Eli Apple, so I really don't know what to say about that. I wouldn't be moved if they did that. And Shaquille Griffin is interesting because before I was filming this, I really thought, maybe he's a top 5 option for this Texans team. But I went back and looked. The Texans released him in 2023 in DeMeco Ryans' first season with this franchise. And I don't know. I think there might be a little bit of sour grapes between Shaquille and the Houston Texans. Not saying that there's any ill will, but I don't know if he would want to be, running back to the team that cut him just a season and a half ago. Now, before I give you my top option that the Texans should sign to replace a Ronald Darby, go down in the comment section and let me know. Shoot your shot. What corner should the Texans sign? Let me know down in the comment section. Is it one of the guys that I just mentioned, on my list, or one of the, Stephon Gilmore, Kendall Fuller, or maybe it's my number 1 option in Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas is my number 1 free agent option for the Houston Texans. I think, somewhat similar to those first guys I talked about, Stephon Gilmore, Kendall Fuller. I could see Rasul Douglas trying to hold out and getting a starting spot because he's still pretty good. He's 29, going to turn 30 this season, has played well in the different stops that he's had around the NFL. And I think, 6'2", 209 has started on the outside, would be a amazing backup for this Texans team. If anything happened, I would really trust a guy like Rasul Douglas to step in. And then, like I said, he's kind of holding out for one of those starting spots. But if you have him, Stephon Gilmore, and Kendall Fuller, I'm a team looking for a starting option, a legit guy. I'd rather have Gilmore or Kendall Fuller on a 1-year deal than a Rasul Douglas. So I would go ahead and sign one of those guys before Rasul. Maybe he finds another team that's wanting to make him a starter. But if he's looking to be a backup, wanting to make an instant impact on a team, I think the Texans are a pretty good fit for one Rasul Douglas. That's all I have for you on today's show, folks. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, you can do so at Jeremy Chuggs. My DMs are always open. And if you made it to the end of today's video, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Free videos all year long on your Houston Texans. 100% free. All you got to do is go down and hit that subscribe button.